Hello everyone, welcome to today's chess video. In this video we are going to go through and analyze the game 1 of the World Chess Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Sergey Karjakin, November 2016. Of course, Carlsen is the defending world champion who won the title from Viswanathan Anand in their encounter at Chennai in November 2013. Sergey Karjakin, who holds the record for the world's youngest grandmaster, is the challenger. Carlsen had white and he started the game with 1d4. Carlsen is known for his versatility in openings. An analysis of his past games show that he has played about 49% of the times as white 1e4 followed by 36% of the times 1d4. He has also played 1 knight f3 in 7% of the times and 1 c4 about 6% of the times. This of course makes it extremely difficult for anyone to prepare against Carlsen. Compare this to Karjakin, for example, he has played 1 e4 as white in about 84% of his games. He has played 1 knight f3 and 1 d4 quite rarely in about 7% and 6% of his games as white. So preparation wise, preparing against Carlsen seems much harder than preparing against Karjakin. To give a bit of a background, Carlsen and Karjakin have played each other 45 times before this, out of which Carlsen had the white pieces in 21 games and Karjakin had the white pieces in 24 games. Their head-to-head record is shown on the screen. It can be observed that Carlsen has a clear edge here. As white, Carlsen has 8 wins against Karjakin, who has 6 wins, which is a decent record, and they have 7 draws. However, there is a sharp difference when Karjakin is white. Karjakin with white pieces against Carlsen surprisingly has a very poor record with just 2 wins from 24 games. And we can see that Carlsen has emerged victorious in 9 occasions. Overall, Carlsen has 17 wins against Karjakin's 8, and Carlsen clearly is starting the World Championship as the favourite. Now, heading back to the game, Karjakin responded with 1 knight f6, and Carlsen played the surprising move to bishop g5. Although it seems surprising at first, it's quite the nature of Carlsen to play something different to get the opponent out of his preparation. In fact, Karjakin of course would have prepared 100 novelties to play before this match, who knows, and perhaps Carlsen was simply not in the mood to play classical setups and allow Karjakin to execute his plans from his preparations. Perhaps that seems to be the reason to me why he played this move to bishop g5, which is known as the Trompowsky's attack. Some are speculating that he played this attack to honor the new president-elect of the US, Donald Trump, which could be the case, but I have no idea. In fact, if you know more about that, please feel free to comment. Now back to the game. The Trompowsky's attack is not played at the highest level in classical chess that often, because it is believed that Black's chance of equalizing the game is very high after this move. However, this is played in blitz chess very often. In fact, Nakamura has played it a lot because it leads to a lot of complicated, interesting positions that suits his style. So it's a very interesting choice by Magnus here, and the game ended in a draw, but it would be incorrect to say that this move alone played a big role in the result of this game. Black has a few options here, and the most common way to play is knight e4, which gains a tempo on the undefended bishop on g5 and occupies the center, and after the bishop retreats to f4 or h4, Black plays d5 or c5 and so on. Also, e6 is possible, countering White's idea to double Black's pawns by taking on f6, because now if bishop takes f6, then the queen will recapture. However, Generally, white will try and exploit the pin with the move e4 threatening e5, and the game can continue with h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and knight c3, where white gets a big center and black gets the bishop pair, leading to some very interesting positions. However, the move Karjakin played was d5, allowing white to capture on f6 and double black's pawns. But Carlsen played the move e3 here, and Karjakin responded with c5, challenging white's center. Carlsen took the knight on f6 with his bishop at this point, giving up his bishop pair to create weaknesses in black's king side, and Karjakin recaptures with the g pawn. It's also possible to capture with the e pawn here, but that can lead to d takes c5, leading to an isolated queen pawn for black. So g takes f6 and Carlsen captures the pawn on c5, d takes c5 is played. Karjakin plays the move knight c6 here, which again is not the most popular move here. Much more common are the moves e6, just looking to recapture the pawn on c5, and also the move queen a5 check, also looking to attack the c5 pawn. But Karjakin plays knight c6 and Carlsen goes ahead and pins the knight to the king with bishop b5. Karjakin plays e6 here and Carlsen replies with the move c4. Black wants to play bishop takes c5 here, but if black does that right away, then c takes d5, e takes d5 will leave black with a very weak pawn structure with 4 pawn islands, double pawns and isolated pawns. So first Karjakin plays d takes c4, and black will be willing to trade queens already. Note that black's pawn weaknesses on the king side are much more vulnerable with the queens on the board. Of course, white doesn't want to trade queens, and Magnus plays the move knight to d2. And at this point, it's safe to assume that both the players are probably out of theory, because after the move knight to d2, which itself is a novelty, there is no other game in the database of the past 25 years with this position. So this move knight d2 just adds to the pressure on c4, and black here rightly develops a piece playing bishop takes c5, and white follows with knight f3. Now black does have this opportunity to create some pawn weaknesses to white with the move c3, forcing b takes c3, leaving white with the isolated a and c pawns. But black castles. Now it seems here that Magnus should have played rook c1 first, stopping c3 ideas, and then castled. But he castles right away, and at this point Karjakin plays knight to a5. c3 would have been good at this position as well. But with this move, black's intention is clear, which is to trade off as many pieces as possible and perhaps aim for a draw. Now white continues rook c1, not really playing knight takes c4, which would allow a queen trade. For example, knight takes c4, queen takes d1, rook f takes d1, knight takes c4, and bishop takes c4 would be fine for black. Karjakin drops the bishop back to e7, adding a defender to the weak f6 pawn, and perhaps clearing the file for his rook, as he intends to play bishop d7 followed by rook c8 if given the opportunity. Carlsen plays the move queen c2, ready to capture on c4 with a knight, only after moving his queen away from the d file, stopping the queen trade. But black goes ahead with the idea of bishop d7, forcing a trade of light squared bishops, because if bishop takes c4, knight takes c4 and knight takes c4 will be great for black, as he will have two bishops against two knights and might have a superior endgame when the queens come off the board. So bishop takes d7 and queen takes d7 are more or less forced here. After the trade of bishops, white can now recapture the pawn. But Carlsen inserts the move queen c3, attacking the knight on a5 to see if black retreats his knight. Also note that queen is attacking the f6 pawn, and knight e4 seems to be a potential threat here. Also will attack the f6 pawn. b6 is a good move for black here, but Karjakin played queen d5, not only defending the knight on a5, but also covering the knight e4 idea. One needs to appreciate that Karjakin has equalized as black here and has secured a draw as long as he shows a good technique. Let me explain why. With the last move, black has added an extra defender to the c4 pawn and is threatening to play rook c8. If rook c8 is played now, then black will simply have the extra pawn and white won't have sufficient compensation for the pawn. So taking on c4 is forced, which leads to a queen trade and a manageable endgame with very high drawing chances. So Magnus plays the knight takes c4 move. Karjakin is happy to trade with knight takes c4, queen takes c4, queen takes c4 and rook takes c4. And black cannot allow rook c7 and therefore plays rook f to c8. And after the trade of one pair of rooks following rook f c1, rook takes c4 and rook takes c4, black threatens mate in 2 with rook d8. Carlsen just creates a loft for his king with the move g3 and Karjakin plays the defensive rook d7. Notice how white was threatening rook c7, forking the e7 bishop and the d7 pawn. We reach this position where the material is equal and white has a slightly better pawn structure. But black's real weaknesses such as the doubled f pawns and the isolated h pawn doesn't seem to be offering a winning advantage for white. Both players in fact show a good endgame technique with king f1, f5, king e2, bishop f6 attacking the b2 pawn, b3, king f8 and h3. h3 is a good move here, aiming to perhaps play g4, which has its advantages and disadvantages. For example, black played h6 and if g4, now f takes g4 and h takes g4 helps white get an open file for attack against the h pawn. But it straightens out black's pawn structure, allowing him to get rid of his double pawns on the f file. Magnus instead played knight e1 here. An interesting try here would have been rook c8 check and after king e7 to play g4 as discussed, resulting in f takes g4 and h takes g4. But white doesn't seem to have a way of taking advantage of the weak h6 pawn. See how the bishop on f6 covers the h8 square, stopping the white rook from gaining any sort of activity. So instead knight e1, king e7 and knight d3 was played. Black continues king d8 here. Note that black still needs to be careful here, and let's say a move like h5 will be an absolute disaster. For example, if h5, then white can go knight f4 attacking h5, and if black pushes with h4, then g takes h4, bishop takes h4 will be met with knight takes e6, discovering an attack on bishop with a white rook, and white will emerge a clear pawn up and has a decisively winning endgame after that. So Karjakin holds the position really solid here with king to d8 and Carlsen goes forward with f4. And now h5 is possible for black as white no longer has the move knight f4. Also note how h5 puts a break on white's pawns beautifully as g4 here will be met with h takes g4, h takes g4 and f takes g4. In other words, stopping g4 and stopping white's kingside pawns from gaining any serious play. Now Magnus tries to get something going on the queen side with a4 and Karjakin replies with rook to d5. Notice how the black king is now guarding the 7th and 8th rank from any infiltration by the white rook, and rook to d5 stops further advance of the a pawn. Basically, white is now unable to progress on the king side, unable to progress on the queen side, and is forced to come up with something good. Magnus tries knight to c5, attacking b7, and after b6 goes knight to a6. Black plays bishop e7 and white responds with knight to b8. White is simply threatening the move knight c6 check that will fork the king and the a7 pawn. Black stops the threat with a5, and after knight c6 check, king e8, white knight goes back with knight to e5. A move like rook c5 here will force a rook trade, as otherwise black's rook will gain some serious activity and could start harassing white's pawns. For example, after rook c5, rook d4, rook c2 check, black's rook seems relatively more active, although the position is still absolutely equal. But black tries bishop c5 and white plays rook c3. The game continued for a few more moves with king e7, rook d3, rook takes d3, king takes d3, f6, knight c6 check, king d6, knight d4, king d5, knight b5, and king c6. The position here is absolutely a draw, and black can even go bishop b4. And if knight c7 check, king d6, knight e8 check, attacking f6, then king d7, and knight g7, attacking h5, black can play h4. And after g takes h4, king f7, knight is forced to h5, and black has the move bishop e1 here, picking up the pawn with king e2, bishop takes h4, and if king f3, bishop e1, knight g3, bishop takes g3, king takes g3, king g6, white cannot make progress, and white has to settle for a draw. One line, for example, if h4, then king h5, and after king h3, king g6, king g3, king h5, and white has to stay guarding the h pawn. If white king tries anything else, he would end up losing here. For example, if king f2, then king takes h4, and the black king will start munching on white pawns here. But Karjakin keeps things simple with king c6 and entering into some repetition here with knight b5 check, king d7, knight d4, and king d6. And the players agree to a draw in this position. Of course, it was a relatively quiet first game in the World Championship match. And let's look forward to the remaining games. Subscribe and stay tuned for more. Bye for now.